You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 397 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin and he's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
It's going well, Jeremy. Just dealing with the after effect of the Bears' blowout slaughter of the Green Bay Packers last night.
Both you and I were in attendance for that amazing Bears come from behind playoff victory, vanquishing the hated Green Bay Packers. Fantastic game, fantastic time. We were still flying high this morning. We couldn't go to sleep last night. It was just incredible. What a game.
And of course, during the game, well, we'll get into that later, the Cubs, of course, decided to break the biggest news in like 7 years, too, which just like they did when we were at the Wilco concert and they decided to sign John Lester, right? It's funny how this works.
Yeah, we will break down all the Cubs news. We said we weren't coming back until we had something to talk about, until the Cubs gave us a reason to talk about it, and that's why we've been gone for so long. It's 2026 now. We haven't podcasted in a while because they didn't do anything, and then they did all the things, and we will cover all the things here shortly. But just to put a bow on the Bears real quick, we mentioned it pregame and postgame, and we said it had a chance to feel like if the Bears were able to defeat the Packers.
This was your analogy. I thought very apt.
I said if they win, which they ended up doing, and it ended up proving out to be correct, this was equivalent to the Cubs defeating the Cardinals in 2015. This is very similar seasons where the Bears and Cubs had no expectations, were playing with house money.
Came out of nowhere.
And
new coach, new stars.
You had a chance to defeat your rival in the playoffs, and it had so many parallels. And being at both, you and I were at both of those games, the Cardinals being eliminated as well as the Packers, and it had so many similarities. It felt so similar, and you really have to take in those seasons. The season before the expectations kick in, you really have to take in that fun, and we had a ton of fun last night.
That's right. And that means next year is a Super Bowl year.
That's based on just my good math.
Past his prologue, yeah.
Exactly. That's and we will talk about the Cubs convention and the 2016 team, the 10-year anniversary. Somehow, I was just talking about math. I don't know how that works, that it's been 10 years, but somehow it has been. We'll talk about Cubs convention. We'll talk about the news and everything. And to help us unpack all things Cubs this week, you know him from his work at Northside Baseball and, of course, his many appearances here on our podcast, Matt Trueblood. Thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
It's no problem if we could keep it on the Cubs as much as possible. As a Packers fan who had resigned myself, when Parsons got hurt, after Kraft got hurt, I was like, well, this is just going to be the upteenth year in a row where in theory this team could win the Super Bowl, but they're obviously not going to. I kind of let it go. And I didn't get Prime Video just to watch the game last night. I was not watching. I was done. I was fine with whatever happened. I don't really like rivalry games. People get too amped up for them. Then they go up 20. Like, the only way you were going to make me care about that game was exactly what happened. Exactly. Go way ahead and then lose in just brutal, nasty fashion. And as someone who runs a Cubs website, to have the biggest news they've made in, a decade stepped on by that game, great. Just perfect. It was a wonderful Saturday night for me.
It is impressive that the Bears, frankly, are so talented and so good that they routinely toy with teams by giving up large sums of points early in the game and then turn it on in the last 5 or 10 minutes, sort of like the Bulls used to do, with Jordan. It's like when they felt like playing, they started playing. And yes, it would be nice if they would just, beat teams from the Jump Street, but this is the way they do it. So, yeah, sorry about that and about all your Cubs news getting trampled on.
Hey, look, it was still cool. It's still, and I'm excited about the Cubs stuff. It was just, if there was one time that it needed to not happen, or it could have happened, and then the Packers just keep winning the way they were still up by like 15 points when that news broke, 12 or something. And if that could have just stayed that way, then a whole bunch of people would have been, okay, well, let's talk Cubs. And instead,
Pete Armstrong was at the game. So I think when he found out about the news and informed his best friend, Caleb Williams, and the rest of the team, it gave them the motivation to say, you know what, let's keep doing this. Let's play another week. So,
well, let's talk about the Cubs and the moves they did. Let's start with the trade that happened first. We'll go in order. And we were into the new year, the Cubs not doing anything. Pat and I were discussing how, Matt Trueblood himself said on our last podcast that the Cubs were going to do stuff, and we were getting the defeatist nature that sometimes overcomes us as Cubs fans.
Can I just ask? I want to find out whether I was reading tone into this or not. So, behind the scenes, folks, Jeremy and Pat have the Wrigleyville Nat, Blue Sky account, the Twitter account back in the day. It's just one person DMing through the account. I'm never sure which of you it is.
It varies.
It varies.
I definitely got a message.
This one was mine.
Right after the Astros signed him that said, "So Matt, when do you want to come on and review our predictions?" I heard a little bit of tone there. Like, well, I guess that
was like 8 days ago, though.
And I said, it's a long off season still. Because but that was pretty funny. I was like, yeah, I know it feels dark, but I think something's still coming. And then bam. Just like that.
Jeremy always reminds me and keeps me off the ledge when he says, Cubs convention hasn't happened yet. They will make the moves right before the convention because they can't possibly go into next week's convention having made no moves.
It is always their internal deadline is Cubs convention, because they have to say what is the thing that is the announcement at Cubs convention. What is the thing we're going to do? And
last year it was Tucker.
Last year
before
Tucker
that it was
and
Sosa.
And Sosa, and you had so they always I feel that's their internal deadline is Cubs convention, and
they definitely want to have something done by then. And it really, the more you think about that, the more it feels like Crane Kenny runs the team. So I try not to think about that, but it's there.
So let's unpack this trade. This was the first huge news when the Miami Marlins were going to trade Edward Cabrera to the Chicago Cubs in exchange for number one prospect, outfielder Owen Caissie, shortstop Christian Hernandez, and infielder Edgardo De Leon. Now, Matt, we'll start with you. This is the first time, like, trading Owen Caissie is the first time I've had hope that they weren't just going to rely on all the prospects coming together, but instead we're going to use the prospects to parlay that into players. And they got a pitcher that has control, and they gave up. Those are expensive, and Owen Caissie was the price. And to me, I'm totally fine with that, and I find it encouraging that the Cubs were willing to part ways with such a top prospect.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's actually more a part of a pattern than most people realize, not because anyone's overlooking anything that they should have noticed, but because up until now it was kind of more subtle. 2 winters ago, they traded Zaire Hope and Drew Ferris for Michael Busch. And those were, Zaire Hope had already climbed really high on a lot of teams' internal prospect rankings. That just hadn't shown up because he'd just been drafted the previous summer. People didn't really know that the Cubs had won big by drafting him in the 11th round, and everyone already knew they had something, right? So they were kind of trading a top prospect then. It just wasn't as well established and buzzy a name.
in large part because they were also acquiring a player in Michael Bush who hadn't really established himself either. So they weren't getting a proven veteran star out of it.
It was very much, I don't think a lot of the public knew what those two players were to the teams involved. You know, it was like the Bush was right around where Owen Caissie is on a lot of national prospect lists now when the Cubs traded for him. They were trading for him then because they already saw him as plug and play, legit big leaguer, and so did lots of teams. But the Dodgers didn't have space for him because of Freddie Freeman. And so they were trading this guy whom they already knew would be a top 100, even a top 50 prospect almost in a blink. But a lot of the public didn't know that yet. And then last winter, it wasn't quite the same thing, but they traded Cam Smith right after making him their first round pick to get Tucker. So they've been folding long-term value into upfront value for a while now with, you know, big and small ways. But this is the clearest case of they waited. You know, there were a couple of false starts on this. The Marlins almost had Caissie last winter for Jesus Luzardo. They wanted Caissie this summer for Cabrera, but finally they got to that deal and they were willing to give up this guy who was just as established as a prospect and really just as big league ready as Bush. I don't think he's going to be as good as Michael Bush, but that's the bet the Marlins are making. And the Cubs are willing to make that trade now to get this guy who's not just a rental like Tucker was, who's not even doesn't feel like as much of a risk as Bush was. This is impact in the short and medium term for which you have to give up a pretty good player, or at least a pretty good prospect.
And you mentioned almost trading Caissie last year to the Marlins for Luzardo. That I think the Cubs doctors then took a look at him and realized that he was going to have too good a year and decided the Cubs should pass on him because his arm was so good that they thought that there must be a trick and he threw too hard. But apparently they learned their lesson this year. But the guy who the Cubs gave up, I mean, we can talk about, well, we don't have to really talk about Christian Hernandez too much other than the fact that he's the guy who the Cubs kind of stole away from the Giants as an international free agent like 7 years ago or something when he was like 12. And some guy at a bar was telling me the Cubs should trade Javi Baez because this guy's going to be the starting shortstop in 2 years. And it's like 2020. And I'm like, dude, no, that's not going to happen. He's not even out of high school. But anyway, the Owen Caissie thing is interesting because I just saw a Steamer projection on him about a week ago, which wasn't super positive. And a lot of Cubs Twitter, that's ridiculous. They don't know what they're talking about. I've seen Caissie, you know, like that kind of thing. And I don't know if the Steamer prediction was too pessimistic or not, but they viewed him. I think they were concerned about the swing and miss problems and didn't think that he would translate as well as maybe some would hope for, you know, in terms of like the OPS kind of stuff. Maybe some power, but maybe not getting on base enough. And I just want to know, Matt, what your take is. And we've also heard a lot about Caissie and about how he was not the savior, but how he was, you know, the next big thing. Quite a few years now. It's, you know, he's been percolating on baseball prospect lists and a lot of other things. And I think people were counting on him. The whole, they should get rid of Happ or Suzuki, or they can get rid of Tucker and play Caissie. That was another big one I heard a lot this offseason. Like, you know, they won't miss a beat. What's your take on Caissie as a player vis-a-vis sort of the general consensus? And do you think that he's worthy of giving up with all the years of control under him for 3 years of Cabrera?
Yeah. So I am probably maybe a little higher than like internal people in the industry are on Owen Caissie, but probably that's right where the public sphere is. You see a lot of lists where he's about 50th on the top 100, something like that. We know, you know, we've been around a long time. This is episode 397 of the podcast. A 50th ranked prospect has a chance to be good, not a great chance to be great, but a pretty good chance to be an everyday player. There's more risk and maybe more upside in his profile than in most. I will say this. He spent basically 2 full years at AAA. And in the second year, first of all, nobody does that anymore. That's really, really unusual, which is why
every other team brings guys up from AA and they start immediately. It's like the Cubs seem to have this and this goes back to Theo, even this longstanding tradition of having to get your minimum number of at-bats in the minors before they'll advance you up. But it's another story for another day, I guess.
Well, I think even within the Cubs, that's changing a little bit. If you demonstrate quickly that you've mastered the level, right? With Caissie, it's this complicated skill set. There is a ton of swing and miss, but more importantly, you'll deal with the swing and miss if it comes with as much raw power as you see from Owen Caissie, if you can consistently get to that power when you connect. Well, the thing is, especially his first time around in AAA, kind of wasn't pulling the ball in the air very much, wasn't generating the kind of numbers you hope to see on contact from a guy like that to make up for what's going to be a really high strikeout rate. The numbers looked way, way better this year. And I think for a lot of people that said, okay, he's ready. Get him in the big leagues already. And everybody stopped doubting this guy. He's going to be that 3 true outcomes, but 35 pushing 40 homers, dude. A lot of teams, not all teams, the Marlins never stopped liking Owen Caissie, but a lot of teams don't think that because one, all of his improvements last year came on fastballs. He showed the same tendency to swing and miss on soft and spin and really didn't change the rate at which he pulled the ball in the air. He hit more homers this past year, but a lot of them were kind of these opposite field 95 miles an hour off the bat that do not leave big league parks. But in AAA, there are lots of parks where you can hit a ball 330 feet the other way and it's going to fly out, that kind of stuff. So internally, I think his stock actually came slightly down this year. But because the Cubs, by knowing who the right buyer was, got basically peak price for Owen Caissie. If you buy into what Edward Cabrera is, which the Cubs have bought into whatever Cabrera is for a long time, even before he had this breakout this past season.
So Caissie mastered the ability to hit a fastball vis-a-vis line drives that may or may not go out of major league stadiums. Right. And you think that although you seem to be a little bit higher on him than others, ultimately this is peak value for him. And this kind of gets to another point we've talked about in the past, which is that the Cubs have had a habit of, because the outfield has been so clogged up the last couple of years, is that prospects, maybe not as high as Caissie, but prospects, on the rise have no place to play. And they kind of play themselves out of AAA. It seems like they're out of their value at AAA, and then they're not really of great value to the team.
And they just sort of slough off the roster, right?
Nelson that's right.
As Alexander.
That's exactly who I was thinking. Those two are thinking of. But with Cabrera, one of the concerns you hear is that he doesn't. He's been either through injuries or whatnot. He hasn't really pitched. From a full season standpoint, has he pitched a full season yet? Probably not, right? I think 26 starts is his
not what we'd like to call a full season anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And last year was really a good year for him, but before that he'd had a couple pretty rough years. I mean, I don't think the Cubs want the 2024 version of the 490 something ERA or whatever he had. But what they do like is the fact that he actually throws hard, which might be a nice contrast to the rest of the painters in the starting rotation. And I keep hearing over and over again about how he's a 96 mile an hour changeup, which I don't know how effective that is, but anyway, leaving that aside, what do you think about Cabrera as a pitcher for the Cubs and where he slots into this rotation, knowing that Steele won't be ready at the beginning of the year, but the Cubs still had roughly 4-ish starters plus Assad and some others.
Colin Ray.
Yeah, Colin Ray. What does this do for the rotation, and where do you see him fitting in?
I think he's your number 2 going into the season. Now that doesn't mean, if Matthew Boyd and Shota Imanaga pitch at their best, what we saw in the first half from Boyd this past year, what we saw from Imanaga for basically all of 2024, those guys can be a step better than probably Cabrera is at this moment. I will also say, I think the Cubs would tell you there's still another level to unlock for him.
That's right.
They may add another pitch to the mix yet. He's already got, I would say, 3 swing and miss weapons in the changeup, the curveball, and the slider. And they really liked Cabrera going all the way back to 2024 when he was having that rough season. They were trying to buy low on him at the time. Instead of being able to buy low on him, they kind of knew what they wanted to do with him, which part of it was lower his arm slot, get into more of his natural mechanical signature. Well, I don't know if you guys remember when Daniel Moskos was hired away from the Cubs in November of 2024, it was to the Marlins, and he just fixed Edward Cabrera. I mean, he went there, Cabrera's slot comes down, they change his pitch mix up, and voila, you saw what happened. I mean, the walk rate plunged, he was healthier. These were all the changes the Cubs would have made themselves if they could have acquired him at a cheaper price earlier. But even the Marlins, before they got a hold of Moskos, knew there was something else to do. And so they did some of that. The Cubs still believe there's more they can and will do. And I think, he could be just about a Cade Horton level pitcher. It's going to be a different shape. He's going to strike out more guys, be less good at inducing weak contact, and probably walk more. And with both guys, you still have those durability questions because we haven't seen either one throw a full season in the majors yet.
Well, the Cubs have him locked in for his age 28, 29, and 30 seasons.
Yeah.
He's only got 421 innings at the major league level so far, which isn't that many for somebody who's been around for, 4 years, 4 or 5 years. So it does seem like, A, there is a possibility of unlocking him. B, he doesn't have as much tread on him as some 28-year-olds might.
You'd love if the reason that the tread was low was
right.
External factor or something instead of the fact that he's just been injured a lot. But again, the delivery changes, and even though he had some injury, some balky stuff this year, and I don't think he's by any means, the injury risk is gone, but you saw he'd had these chronic shoulder issues, and when he had issues this year, it was with the elbow, not the shoulder. Obviously, you don't want his elbow to blow out, but I'd rather deal with an elbow than a shoulder, especially if you had chronic shoulder issues. Change the delivery to something that's more natural. Maybe his elbow just has to get used to it too. So, we'll see, but I like the risk quite a bit. I think this is the most they could have gotten with Owen Caissie and no true, co-headliner in the package.
Jackson Wiggins type.
Right. Exactly. That's the thing. They kept some of those elite pitching prospects, which is pretty exciting. They add Cabrera to the rotation. So Cabrera, Horton, Boyd, Tyone,
No. Matt said it was Horton, Cabrera, Boyd.
In no particular order. In no particular.
And then Tyone, who everybody seems to forget about. But, can I ask one last question about Cabrera before we move on? You said he doesn't induce a lot of weak contact yet. Do you think the Cubs defense and or the playing conditions at Wrigley Field, especially with the wind blowing in and the way it's become more of a pitcher's park, would be helpful to Cabrera, even though that might not be, something. He might not induce a lot of weak contact, but the Cubs infield can even catch hard contact too, which is another thing. I mean, if he keeps the ball on the ground. But do you see any upside or advantage to playing with this defense in this ballpark?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Cubs defense is better than the Marlins defense overall. There's going to be some changes in their defense next year. We'll get to that shortly, I'm sure. But there's also you don't have to induce a lot of weak contact to maximize a good defense. Sometimes the way you benefit most from having Pete Crow Armstrong behind you is throw your nasty stuff, get a lot of swings and misses, and if occasionally a ball wanders over the middle of the plate and a guy hits one 370 feet on a line, Pete might intercept it before it hits the ground, whereas another center fielder would have it drop. So, yeah.
If he can get used to playing in front of more than 6,500 fans at a time, I think this could work.
It's going to be a culture shock, man.
People are going to actually be paying attention to what he does. That might keep him honest and make him try hard too. We'll see.
So you look at that, in addition to all of the bullpen moves, the Cubs have added a ton of depth, a lot of one-year contracts in the bullpen.
Middle-aged journeyman out of the bullpen.
They're going to throw a lot at the wall.
Jeremy.
Yeah, this is. So we've got another Jed bullpen lining up here, where it's going to be a wild ride to figure out who's in, who's out. But the starting rotation, having that kind of depth, pushes those guys like Assad and the Colin Rays and those folks to the bullpen to hopefully make it even more deep going into the season. So all Cubs fans were really excited that the Cubs made a move. They made this trade. This was exciting. And then the big news: Alex Bregman signs with the Cubs. He's 5 years, $175 million. That $35 million per year AAV is a little less because there's some deferred money.
Shocking.
As of the time of this recording, I don't know if we know all of the. I don't think we have all the details on what's deferred and what's not. However, like you mentioned there, Pat, the concept of the Cubs deferring money. Welcome to how you should do deals here in 2026.
And just as a public service announcement to everybody who worries about deferred money and Bobby Bonilla getting $1 million every year for the rest of his life, deferred money is actually to the team's advantage because of the time value of money. If you're paying this guy 10 years from now $5 million, it's not the value of $5 million today, which is why a $35 million average contract over the course of 5 years comes down to 30, because that money, albeit paid later on. People don't like having like credit card debts, I guess, but consider this getting just a boatload of like airline miles in exchange, right? Because you actually get more value out of it than if you just paid them the 35 million up front. So deferred money is actually a good thing, I think.
Absolutely. And it is so great to see them change that policy. This was one of the reasons they missed out on Bregman last winter. Another one was they weren't willing to do an opt-out after each year of the deal, the way the Red Sox were, right? But they were offering a longer deal with a higher true annual average value, except the Red Sox were willing to do this thing that looks real, looks like $40 million a year as sort of a vanity project or whatever, because half of that money was deferred each year. I'm pretty sure I've done some digging behind the scenes here. I think it's going to be $15 million per year is deferred. So it's like $75 million deferred in total. How that'll be spread exactly, we'll get those details later. But basically, it's going to bring it down to a 5 and 150 in real money for competitive balance tax purposes, for how it's really hitting the Cubs' wallet.
That leaves flexibility to make one more move, maybe a minor move, but a move nonetheless.
Yeah, so I saw some people saying that technically with these deferrals, they're still under the CBT threshold. I can say from what I heard before this deal got done, Hoyer had permission to go over the CBT threshold to land either Bregman or Bo Bichette. They always wanted Bregman. Bichette was they were interested in a real way, but their preference was Bregman.
At Jed's price, right?
Yeah, courting Bichette, I think, was a little bit so that Scott Boras wouldn't have crazy leverage over him.
Right.
And so, but he had permission to go over the CBT for either one of those guys. And I'm pretty sure, unless they make a move to offload salary, which isn't out of the question, but at this moment, I don't think it's in the cards. Unless they move a Tyone or a Nico Horner, someone with significant salary, think of them as over the line right now, because they are within about $1 million of that. And they have reachable incentives for multiple players that would push them right over that line. So don't think about them as under the tax at this moment. If they make a move to shed salary, that's why they're doing it. But Hoyer had permission before making this deal to end up over the tax for the year if he could sign one of them. So I don't think they're worrying about that 244. The next threshold's 264. I don't think we'll see him go past that second threshold. And they may not even go, past about 250. But their real payroll for this season is also lower than their CBT threshold number because of where everybody is in their contracts. So they're spending, man. This is not quite all in, but it's something that looks a lot more like all in than we've seen since Hoyer took over for Theo.
So what you said is great news, because if they're willing to go over the tax this year, that means they've got how much more? 30 more million until the next level, right? I mean, don't do what you did 2 years ago and go over by 18 cents, right? Just go, right? If you're going to go. And since 2/3 of the team won't be here next year,
right,
in 2027, right? I mean, they owe like $8 to the rest of the team combined after next year for the most part. You don't have to worry about being over the threshold 2 years in a row, and with the new CBA, that's going to all change too. So anyway, that's just my PSA for everybody.
Imanaga, Tyone, Boyd all come off the payroll, and
happen Suzuki.
Right. But I'm just in a replacement kind of thing. If they have their way, those three guys will slough off, and they will replace one of them with Jackson Wiggins,
right?
Dirt cheap, and they'll have, Ray fill in or Assad fill in. They may trade Assad in the meantime, between now and then. Who knows? But really, they're thinking about they can save $40 million from this year's payroll into next year's without losing any projected value. At least that's what they hope will happen if player development and injuries break right for them this year. So, yeah, they're willing to go over this year because they're anticipating being able to duck right back under next year without taking a step back competitively.
You could even argue maybe they should get somebody this year if they can get a bargain at 10 or 12 or 14 million on a multi-year deal, just because they're going to need bodies next year at certain positions. I mean, it's hard to replace 14 people at once.
Yes. I don't know that there's anyone out there that they're still real interested in for like another big move this winter. And I would say, I don't think they want to flirt too hard with that second threshold. And Jed always likes to keep money to spend in season at the deadline. So,
we've heard.
A little surprised that there's another big move coming before opening day. But even as it is,
Matt, WWDD. What would the Dodgers do? If we were the Dodgers, we'd be signing Kyle Tucker tomorrow and putting him in the outfield and having Suzuki be the DH and having Ballesteros, ease into the system when Suzuki and Happ and everybody goes on their 15-day DL stints. That's what the Dodgers would do, right?
I don't think that's a bracelet that Tom Ricketts wears.
It is not.
WWDD.
Let's talk about Bregman. And the Cubs did not sign him last year. He signed with the Red Sox and didn't have that great of a year with the Sox. A lot of injury time missed, and it was good before the injury and then was pretty okay when he came back. Wasn't really lighting the world on fire. The Red Sox wanted him back, even though that was his performance last year. How good is Bregman going to be this year? What do you think his performance level is going to be? What we saw in the first half of last year or the second half of last year? And are you surprised that the Red Sox weren't able to make that deal happen?
I'm not shocked. I think I'm more surprised that the Cubs were willing to go this far. I think Jed pushed a little beyond his comfort zone, which he does not like to do. He
went over 2 years, so yeah, you got him there.
Yeah, and just he's been so good at getting his guy on his terms. Even when they went 7 years for Dansby, they always knew it was going to be a long-term deal. They got him at a nice, reasonable $25 million a year. They felt really good about his medium to long-term outlook at shortstop. They really don't like to stretch this hard. This is more money per year than they paid Bellinger on a deal that had all that flexibility, but was ultimately short term. I'm more surprised that the Cubs went and did this than I am that the Red Sox didn't go any farther. But there's no question the Red Sox wanted him. And the reason they wanted him is twofold. It's because he's a metronome offensively. He's had one down year. It was 2024, where he was genuinely not himself over a prolonged period. And specifically, I think he had to kind of change his approach, adapt to losing a little bit of bat speed, and the walks dried up on him. He lost the excellent strike zone control that he has just exhibited throughout his career. It was back this past year. he's still definitely had a lull in the second half. I would not sweat that too much. I wouldn't expect him to slug 480 or whatever it was this past season. That was his highest since 2019. And I think some of that's just being able to bounce, routine fly balls off the green monster. But he also, over the last 2 years, has hit 13 balls that would have been home runs at Wrigley Field that were not home runs because he wasn't hitting to that nice, comfy, that left center power alley. We all know the one spot where even in the last few years, Wrigley Field's very home run friendly. It's basically where the scoreboard is in left center, right? Bregman hits a lot of balls there, man. He's going to be great. I think he's going to fit really nicely into a lineup that needed righty to sort of balance things. Your best hitter's clearly Michael Busch, and probably your second and third best. Well, if PCA is going right, you got Happ, you got PCA, you got Ballesteros. You had Seiya and you have Nico, but Nico doesn't offer any power. And this guy comes in and just perfectly spreads and smooths the lineup, lengthens everything. He's an excellent fit. Longer term, obviously, there's going to be a decline. He's heading into his age 32 season, and you got him through 36. But shorter term, the strike zone control is phenomenal. The feel for the barrel is excellent. And he doesn't need to be an explosive athlete to succeed. So he can age a little more gracefully than a lot of guys who are at the same stage of his career, which I think is part of why Jed's been so dogged in his pursuit of him.
I feel like for people who are sweating the $35 million a year, which probably is an average of $30 million a year in reality, just, there's always sticker shock when you sign a free agent these days. But it's not 3 years from now. I mean, look at the Freddie Freeman deal he signed with the Dodgers a couple of years ago. At the time, people were, the Cubs could never pay that. That's ridiculous to pay that much money. And, this $35 million a year would look like, $22 million a year, 3 years, if it had been 3 years ago, $22 million is too much. So it has a tendency to even itself out. So even as he maybe regresses a little bit statistically over a couple of years, hopefully not for the first couple of years, but maybe 5 years isn't like 7 or 8 years, Jason Hayward. 5 years is 5 years. And so maybe, if he's slowing down in year 4, 30 million a year in year 4 will not feel like the 30 million we think of now. So, I mean, there's that added advantage. And, one of our critiques of disappointments in the Cubs free agent signings over the last couple of years is the unwillingness to sign a star to a long-term deal. They get Kyle Tucker for the 1 year, but the Sotos and leave a Tanya aside, but we really want Freddie Freeman. There are a lot of players that have been out there that we've really thought the Cubs should try to make a move on, and they didn't. And it seems that those, especially the long-term deals, like the 10-year deals and the 7-8 year deals, really are outside the comfort zone of the Cubs philosophically, probably, if nothing else, if not financially also. So at this point in time, to be able to get a guy for 5 years might be a good player, an above, not just above average, but a shade below all-star level good player for 5 years is probably the best we can hope for in a free agent. So I'll take it.
Do you feel, Matt, that this lineup now, the way it's constructed, is an improvement on what we saw when the lineup had a healthy Kyle Tucker in it last year? Is it better or is it worse than going into the season?
Yeah. Kyle Tucker at his best is a better hitter than Alex Bregman. But obviously that's a different question than the one you're really asking, right? It's, first of all, they didn't have that long a window of the best version of Tucker. But secondly, when they did have the best version of Tucker, it also lined up with the best version of Carson Kelly, like ever, and the best version of Pete Crow Armstrong. And if you get back that first half version of PCA, and you can really, really trust, like Alex Bregman, I trust so much more a consistent level of production from him than you got from Tucker. I don't think there's going to be the ups and downs, the valleys. He's going to give you what he's going to give you. And I think it's really helpful And if you have that explosive version of PCA, that explosive version of, say, a Suzuki from the first half, then yeah, I think this lineup's better. I just don't, obviously we can't know for sure whether we're going to get that version of PCA back. Can't know for sure whether that version of Seiya's even coming back, although with there, at least you have more of a track record of him being successful, even if it was in different ways previous to that. With PCA, it's this great big wild card that we'll just have to wait and see. But the other variable there is last year, however you lined things up, there was one more spot that now Moises Ballesteros is filling. And a big part of this double maneuver of trading Caissie for Cabrera and signing Bregman is they're kind of betting on Ballesteros being a better hitter short to medium term than Caissie would have been, and being able to play him not every day, but against pretty much every righty as the DH. They're expecting to get a lot of production out of him and Bush and Happ from the left side against righties, Horner and Bregman and Suzuki from the right side against righties and lefties, of course. And then the variable, the guy who can make this either an elite offense or just a top 10 and you hope it's enough, is PCA.
I do feel like having Ballesteros, as you pointed out, as lefty, helps balance this lineup when you look at it on paper in ways that we've dreamt about often over the years. But that is, of course, dependent on PCA being the PCA of the first 3 months, not 4 months, not the last two. And we've seen him kind of go up and down. But overall, it does seem like, I think you made a point earlier about how Bregman kind of lengthens this lineup. I think that's really true. And I think that's sort of what the Cubs desperately needed, was to have a lineup where the bottom five guys weren't all players who you thought didn't have a whole lot of chance to get on base, because, and we don't know yet. I'll be very curious to see. We got to get on Zimborski to fire up the Zips machine.
The Zips machine, yeah.
Because, and I've been thinking about this point a lot, Matt, over the last couple of weeks. If I had to do the over, and this is probably for a better safer podcast closer to the season, but a podcast on the over-unders of, you count WAR, OPS plus, whatever you want to say, stat for the Cubs lineup, and you just use last year's number. Will they be better or worse? Catcher, worse. Second base, can't get much higher, right? Probably worse. And you just go up and down. You're like, the corner outfielders are all getting older, just an extra year over 30, and so yeah, there is that possibility of the team offensively having kind of peaked at this point, aside from aside from Ballesteros and what Bregman brings to the team. So hopefully those variables will help hold us afloat, if not increase, because as you pointed out, top 10 offense is great, but that doesn't get you to the World Series. You have to be one of the top handful of offenses, 2 or 3, probably 4.
Yeah, I mean, unless your pitching staff is the best in the league, which I think we can feel it. It would be hard to argue that this pitching staff isn't better than last year's, right? They're bringing back pretty much everyone important. Yeah, yep. Obviously you're losing Keller and Pomerantz, but you're making up for that by adding Phil Maton and Cabrera, who also slots everyone down and rung in the rotation and even spills some of that value over into the bullpen.
Yeah,
it's a better pitching staff.
You have Ray and Assad as longmen in the bullpen, if they want to use them, as I've been begging them to, for multi-inning games, or appearances. Yeah, they do seem to have the makings of a better staff than last year.
I mean, I think it's a good pitching staff. I don't know if it's good enough to carry you deep into October unless you get that offense that's really switched on. So a lot of this is just a bet on, we've seen flashes. Now we need to see a full season of successful player development driven offense where, yeah, you paid the big money for Bregman and for Swanson and to keep around Happ and to bring in Suzuki and to extend Horner. But those guys you sort of trust. There's also not the incandescent superstar in that mix, at least at this stage of their careers. So you're betting on either Michael Busch sustains what he did last year, which is asking a lot, but his process was just as good as his numbers, or you get PCA to do what he did early without absolutely going in the tank late the way he did, which it's a fair thing to hope for, but maybe it's too early to expect it.
Another change compared to last year's team. Does Bregman at third mark a turning point in Matt Shaw's role with the team?
Man, yeah, I think it is a important, you should assume that signing Alex Bregman is a demonstration of less than perfect faith in Matt Shaw. That doesn't mean that he's out the door. In fact, it could mean that Shaw's just going to slide over to second base in 2027 because they're not going to pay what's going to be a real big price to keep Nico Hoerner. But I would not be real surprised if Matt Shaw is traded, whether that's right now or it's June or July when they want to plug their biggest need and he's probably their best trade chip now. I think they certainly like Hoerner better as a player. They obviously like Bregman better as a player. Shaw, in theory, makes this nice little utility piece, but in practice, I don't know. It was such a roller coaster ride with his offense last year, and I hated that big old leg kick and the weird setups and sequence of changes he went through. Some of them were successful, but then he'd go right back into failure because he was just trying to make way too big a set of adjustments from 1 week, 1 month to the next. There's a little bit of a faltering belief in him within the organization. And you could even see, even if they think Hoerner's going to leave next winter, if they also believe maybe they can develop Jefferson Rojas into the shortstop that that shortstop of the future and slide Dansby to second in a year or two, they may be willing to trade Shaw even if they anticipate Hoerner leaving. And you stop a gap for a year in there if you need to with a different free agent. But I don't think Matt Shaw's long-term place in the organization is all that safe at this moment. Nor, frankly, should it be. His rookie year was not bad, but it wasn't that good. It just was not. I think, I was kind of the low man on him coming into the season, so maybe I have confirmation bias, but I was not terribly impressed, except by his growth as a defender. He was a really good third base.
Yeah, the defense really saved him, I thought.
Yeah.
Both in terms of playing time and value. But you're right. I think it would have been a lot probably cheaper and easier to replace a DH and or right fielder than a third baseman. So the Cubs went after Bregman, the third baseman, which shows me, conversely, that they had more faith in Ballesteros than they did in Shaw.
Yeah,
because
no, I think there's even less question about that than there is that they believe more in Ballesteros than in Caissie. It's like, they could have signed. I don't know. I think Cody Bellinger might end up with a similar deal to what Bregman got, but they could have brought back Cody Bellinger, and the comfort level would have even been probably higher because he's been here before, and you knew he enjoyed his experience. You enjoyed having him around. There's not this weird wrinkle you're going to have to iron out of Dansby and Bregman in the past have not gotten along great. So
1 and 2,
fine, but it's something that you have to navigate, and you wouldn't have had to with Cody. They made an active choice here, and it is reflective of the opinion of Matt Shaw. And I think, again, that's the right thing to have done. If your opinion of him didn't come down this season, I think you weren't watching closely enough what happened from February to October.
I think also the Cubs do view Bregman as a good clubhouse guy and a stand-up guy. And I think in their mind, he and Dansby, who've both demonstrated themselves to be mature adults for many years now. And, the backstory is, of course, Dansby was the number 1 pick in the draft and Bregman was second, years ago. And Ian Happ was 9th, so we have 3, and Tucker was in there too. I think the Cubs have had 4 of the remaining 7 top 10 draft picks or 6 picks in that draft who are still in the majors. But I don't really have any real concerns about those two long term. They're at an age where they're not 23. I mean, they're 30-year-olds. They know what they're doing, and they'll be fine. But the area where I might depart a little bit from you, and it's not really a departure, but I have a sinking suspicion, I should say, that Matt Shaw will be the Cubs 2027 starting second baseman. We'll see if that plays out. But that's the only position I see him. That's the only position on the Cubs I see him being able to play consistently moving forward in the future. And if they don't view him as that, then they should trade him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's because there's nowhere else for him to go.
And I said that I don't think there's a target that they have in mind for the rest of this offseason, but there is a player type that could still help them an awful lot, which is, with Horton, Cabrera, all the starting options we already listed, all the veteran relievers they brought in, who are by definition out of options, they were free agents. There's very little flexibility in this pitching staff. If they could trade Shaw and get, maybe it's a package that's kind of similar to what the Cubs gave up for Michael Busch, only it's one of those two guys is less high upside and closer to the majors, so that you've got an optionable pitcher to add to your mix. Someone like when they got Hayden Wesneski, this guy who can come up and down, maybe can start, maybe can relieve, but you add fluidity to a pitching staff that's going to be kind of roster locked for a lot of the season. That would be a way to make the 2026 team better in the process of moving this player who could otherwise be a contributor in 2026. So
yeah, ideally they would get somebody too who has a little bit of a future, because they do know, as you pointed out earlier, they're going to be losing quite a few pitchers at the end of the season, most likely. And the long documented inability to develop their own pitchers leads them to have to chase the free agency market in pitching quite a bit, and or trades for pitchers, which we've seen too. So that's another possibility. But I just think, I know, and it really irritates people whenever the idea of trading Nico Horner comes up, because that's anathema to people who like him because they like the way he plays the game, and I do too.
Yep.
He will be 29 and a half, or 29, I should say, in May. I think May 13th. So this is the last year of his contract, and I don't know if he's, given his lack of power and other things, I just don't know if his profile is one where the Cubs are going to want to sign him to a 4-year deal for ages 30, 31, 32, and 33 at, $17 million a year. I don't think and we'll see with the new CBA how that all plays out too, but I just don't see him as somebody who the Cubs plan on having long-term, longer than they already have had, for a number of reasons. And, Shaw, although he doesn't have as much pop as you'd like for a third baseman, for a second baseman, he's maybe, if his glove is as good as, he's demonstrated at third, which if they do keep him this year, of course, then that turns him into a super utility guy, and he gets to rest people. And maybe Dansby Swanson doesn't have to play every single game, and they can allow Horner to play short a little bit and Shaw to play second. And, maybe Bregman can DH once in a while because he's getting a little older, and give him a breather, and let, Shaw play third base, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It would, people say, well, good teams don't do that. I'm like, I think good teams do that all the time with young players. They bring them in. How many times have we seen, young pitchers who start off in the bullpen before they go into the rotation, or even, are kind of like jack of all trades, Javi Baez being a good example, because they do bring the ability defensively to play different positions. And maybe that's the other direction they go with Shaw if they don't trade him, because they do think that they're going to lose. Let's put it this way: if they trade Shaw, that leads me to believe that they're going to try to hold on to Nico or replace him with somebody of equal value. If they don't trade Shaw, I think that means Nico's gone next year.
Yeah, that's the easiest reading of it, at least. And I think it's on balance the most likely thing, because to trade Shaw, you'd have to make sure that you really like the value you're getting back. You wouldn't do it just to avoid an awkward situation where he's eating into someone's playing time, or he himself is unsatisfied with his own playing time. You're not going to do that for those reasons at this stage of the competitive cycle with the team you've built. you would have to know, A, you can find a competent infielder to fill that role on your roster, take over for him, and B, that you're getting back enough to justify it, long term. And finding that perfect trade partner who checks at least one of those boxes and leaves you money to spend or something to check the other if needed, that's not easy. So there's a chance that he gets dealt, but I think it's more likely they just play out the season the way the roster is currently structured.
As we look ahead to the season, with the NL Central current lay of the land being what it is, the Cardinals are graciously going to sit out this next season. The Pirates have an annoyingly good rotation that I don't want to see very often. The Reds made the playoffs last year, and of course you've got the Brewers. Will the Cubs? Is this the Cubs keeping up with the Brewers, or do you see? I know you've been predicting the next 5 years of the Brewers' success continuing to grow here, and what they have in place being extremely impressive.
I think what you said was the Cubs' best chance of catching the Brewers was 2025 for the next 5 years. So in the winter of 2031, we can re-examine that prediction. But
does the current makeup of the Cubs keep them competitive with the Brewers, or put them ahead of the Brewers in any way?
I think the Cubs have closed the gap, at least for now. And to me, these can be co-favorites. Going into this past season, which, as you pointed out, I said, like at mid-season or kind of during the streak where the Brewers went completely insane and surged past the Cubs.
Yes.
I said this was the point when the Cubs had the best chance that they'll have for a while to beat this team. Well, the Brewers haven't shown the, not even financial muscle, but just sort of the financial presence that I think they should have and are actually capable of, but are not in the mood to flex this winter. I think quite soon the Brewers are going to trade Freddie Peralta. And when we find out when they do, or if they do, what they get in return might tell us a lot about how to feel about, the 2026 team. I think they're looking for a player who can definitely still step in and fill that role in exchange for him. Not obviously as good as Freddie Peralta, but they'll do what they always do, make a really good trade in that situation. And I think they'll still be neck and neck with the Cubs. But I had the Brewers winning 89 games and the Cubs winning 88 last opening day. Those exact numbers weren't right, but spiritually, that's kind of how it played out. I think this year, right now, I would sort of flip it. And I'd say maybe the Cubs are a 92 win team and the Brewers are a 91 win team. And we'll see what happens the balance of the offseason, but they've caught them and they may even be a nose ahead. I don't think that has a lot of staying power at this moment. I do need to remind people that the Brewers are building a long-term powerhouse, even as they're continuing what's been a miniature dynasty in the NL Central. But right now for 2026, I think the Cubs are in good position and the Brewers have to get better if they want to enter the season as co-favorites or favorites on their own.
Is it possible that one of these days the Brewers will make one of these trades, like a Devin Williams, Josh Hader trade, maybe with Freddie Peralta be a good time to start, where they don't get much back as it turns out, like they think they did, but turns out the guy they got back sucks and they just, they just lose out on having an ace pitcher? Could that happen maybe, please?
It's going to take another couple of years of cannibalizing their front office or their player development staff, because they're good at everything.
It's got to be harrowing as a fan, though, to have a guy, to be in a team. I mean, we have our complaints about how the Cubs don't spend enough, but to be on a team where you have to trade all your good players before they're free agents, not just re-sign them, but before they're free agents, and you just have to kind of hope that, and with I guess good measure lately, that that the team will somehow figure out a way to get guys back who can help you. But it's got to be dispiriting to lose a guy who can help you today for somebody who will hopefully help you next year, early 2027, seven, what it just, I don't know. That's got to be, that's a high wire act, and they seem to manage it pretty well. Circus, stars that they are, but I don't know. I as a fan, that would make me nervous.
It absolutely. There are a lot of Brewers fans who deal with that anxiety even now. I will say there's a couple of one. We've talked about this before, previous times that I've been on with you guys. The rules sure help you not feel quite as nervous about it, because the rules really help small market teams keep that machine going. If they're good at drafting, scouting and development, then the extra pool money you get to sign free agents, international free agents every
unlimited
year.
Draft picks. That helps.
And the revenue sharing probably needs to be more robust, but it's already not as bad as small market teams would like you to believe it is. The Brewers have lots of ways of getting boosts to keep that system running. They still have to keep being good at everything, and it does make some fans nervous, but also you see them exercise good judgment too. They did, the Christian Yelich contract has played out better than it looked like it would at a couple of stretches, but still hasn't been a boon for them.
Yeah, he's still got many years left on that to prove himself.
What is it? 3? It's not, it's not hanging around their neck forever at this point. But yes, that deal could have worked out better. It could have worked out worse. But they did make that one exception where they were like, this is a guy we're just going to sign and invest in. And they're kind of due to do that again soon. Probably won't be Peralta.
Churio.
Contreras. Might not be.
Churio, right? Long-term deal.
The Churio deal, that's a whole different category. That's going to look like
robbery.
Acuna Jr.'s deal in a couple of years.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I still think the Brewers have a chance to win even in 26 is I think you're going to see Jackson Churio take big step forward. But
if he wants to get out of that deal because he was enticed to sign it as a minor or something, I'd be happy to represent him in that effort. Because I think that he was preyed upon and taken advantage of, Scottie Pippen-esque, and I feel like he deserves his day in court.
Not to not to take another turning point in this podcast, but I don't think any Venezuelan players are currently looking for ways out of contracts that guarantee them work visas here in the States. Even if it has a potential for a bigger payday later. But anyway, the Brewers, they held on to Willy Adames and let him go all the way to free agency. They make that decision now and then. And that really gives you more confidence too in when they do trade a guy, it's usually for a good reason. You saw what happened with Devin Williams, and the year that Caleb Durbin had, now he's kind of their third baseman of the present and medium-term future. Only they already have the next guy lined up behind him ready the first time he falters. It's a heck of an operation, which again doesn't mean the Cubs can't knock him off, because they have always needed to flex the one big advantage they do have, which is financial might, and voila, Alex Bregman.
Do you believe in the curse of the L flag?
Yeah.
I mean, Wisconsin teams are now 0 for 4 in the playoffs since flashing that. I'm just saying.
I will say the only part of it that annoyed me in any way, I don't want to say annoyed like I was up in arms about it, but I was like, guys, that's not a legit L flag. It's a white flag with a blue L on it. That's not what they fly. Somebody scrounge up an authentic article. It's not
my
that
cousin
hard.
the second they did that. I texted my cousin, or actually before they even did it, as the game was concluding. I said, well, let's just hope he's a Brewers fan. I said, let's hope for your sake that this isn't their Super Bowl and that, they just, lay down like dogs for the Dodgers. He's like, no, I don't think it will be. We conversed over Thanksgiving, and he has changed his position on that. He thinks that kind of emotionally was it. Who knows if it will be for the Bears, but it was sort of a peak accomplishment, and we'll see if they have the power to regain that um, prior success, or if the L flag will haunt them forever. Who knows?
That was a wild moment, man. That whole
Yeah.
I am as just again as a person who born in Central Illinois, mostly grew up in Wisconsin, went to school in Chicago. Now I live in Minnesota. Run sites that cover the Twins and the Brewers and the Cubs, and I can't survive much more of these rivalry collisions. I don't want anything to do with them. Everyone I know enjoys them so much. And even if it makes them angry, they for some reason enjoy being really angry. I just want everyone to not be jerks to each other, and it's not working.
Yeah, it's the high stakes that I don't like. It feels like it's higher stakes than it should be. Like it's one thing to lose to the Giants or to the Mets or something, but the Cardinals or the Brewers just feels too like, or White Sox, or it's just too at home. There's too many other people out there who will needle you over that, whereas you won't get needled because there are no Braves fans in Chicago. You know what I mean? Like the stakes are too high.
Action on the field of that series, that Cubs Brewers series, was great. I loved the back and forth, each team winning their first two games at home, and just the tension of it all. But there were so many fans. I didn't enjoy anything around it at all. And I wanted to enjoy it, but I couldn't because it's just people are too, I don't even know what the word is, confrontational, too focused on their enemies in these particular matchups. I don't see a way out of it because these two teams are going to be fighting for the division again this year, but we got to ratchet down the intensity a little.
What I enjoy is the time of year where the Friday of Cubs convention, we get to see all of our friends from the Cubs blogosphere, other podcasters, other bloggers, writers, people who cover the beat, from all people who've been on this podcast, guests and friends alike. We get to see them, most of them on Cubs convention weekend. A lot of them are in town to cover the festivities. We try to get to Lizzie McNeil's on the Friday night for Cubs convention. Looking at this Cubs convention lineup, obviously the big story is the Compound Live with Ian Happ, a sit down with Craig Counsell.
Bingo with Ryan Dempster, I hope.
Yes, I'm sure there'll be some Ryan Dempster hilarity. And,
when that's not happening anymore, neither is CubsCon. That's
the kids only press conference and more not. So the things we won't see, no Ricketts panel again this year. The big story is the 2016 World Series team reunion, the 10-year anniversary. They announced the attendees for this. And looking at the attendees list, some names I was excited to see, like, I love when John Lester comes around. Miguel Montero, haven't heard that name. What a hero! Like, we need to give that guy his flowers for 2016. Jason Hayward will be there. Anthony Rizzo, of course. Joe Madden coming back. We haven't seen him around the organization in a while, and I was surprised by the lack of David Ross. No David Ross mentioned as an attendee, so that was a hey, maybe that split was cut a little deeper than we knew about.
Is Aroldis Chapman not allowed to come back because he's still playing baseball 10 years
No
later?
active. Yeah, you'll see there's no active players that were invited back.
How many active players are there? Baez and him?
Contreras.
Yeah.
Carl Edwards Jr., I think, still pitched this past year.
Yes, he is listed as an alumni, so he'll come.
Hayward has not officially retired, has he?
That's true. He played this past year, too.
He played this past year, but he's currently not on a team.
Yeah. I would guess he'll... I don't know. That's an interesting one.
A really interesting one was Addison Russell's name being added to this list. And I was I was surprised. I don't think that as a piece of shit human being that he is, I don't think he needs to be celebrated at Cubs convention. I hope that the crowd boos him, and I just don't even know why the organization would invite him. It was surprising. You don't have to do it. Well, you just don't have to. And I was really surprised that his name was on the list.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, there sure are a weird number of weird vibes around, I guess it's a mark of how we've changed as a society and a sporting culture. It's not like the 1985 Bears are short on problematic personalities.
Sure.
But any time the 85 Bears get together, everyone, if you were on the 85 Bears, they would look the other way on just about all of it. Just about anything.
Social media too, it's a different
exactly.
era.
And just, we don't live in that time anymore though. So it's weird that Addison Russell is going to be there. Honestly, it's not, I don't have a problem with it, but it's going to be awkward in its own ways that Joe Madden's back. It's notable that David Ross isn't. And you mentioned Montero, whom I love, and I'm glad he's back. And, he was great. The circumstances of him leaving the team, Anthony Rizzo called him a terrible teammate on the radio. And they cut him and Rizzo's going to be there too. It is insane what this 10-year celebration, which starts with this CubsCon and will go all season.
All season, absolutely. Yeah.
It's going to be this very bizarre reminder of just how rapidly everything went completely sideways after that season. You got a bunch of guys together who it just exploded. A bunch of careers that looked like they were headed to the Hall of Fame, and
speaking of which, Chris Bryant won't be there, right? Because he's still technically
he's technically active. Yes,
Chris Bryant won't be. Jorge Soler, I'm remembering now, is also still active.
Correct.
So
he's not on the list as well. Correct.
A lot of people don't remember that Jorge Soler was even on the 16 Cubs because he's practically had one foot out the door and was traded within 4 weeks of the end of it. Anyway,
closer. Do you remember who they got for him? From Kansas City. Yeah.
Wade Davis,
who had a great half season.
Season,
I guess he did strike out Bryce Harper.
Such a streak of trading players with lots of long-term value for barely any time with a relief pitcher that he couldn't stop. So anyway, I am looking forward to this because obviously that season was magical. 2015 was magical, but there's just so many strange and uncomfortable storylines around it all. How many moments are you going to remember that have to be tinged now with, oh yeah, but Addison Russell was the hero of that moment? Or, even though he's not going to be around for the celebration, Aroldis Chapman was the hero of that moment. And how do we all feel about that? How do we even feel about it at the time? And I don't know.
Is Zobrist going to be there?
Zobrist he's
the
on
MVP
some
of the
lists,
World Series,
and so he shows up occasionally on these lists. So it does look like the most current list has been Zobrist. Yes,
Mike Montgomery, I hope, is there.
Mike Montgomery is also on the list. Yes.
What else is he going to do?
What else would he have to do?
He's available. Would like to discuss.
He threw the most the most famous pitch in baseball history.
Yeah,
if you're a Cubs fan. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, they're bringing out Trevor Cahill, Chris Coughlin.
Is Justin Grimm going to make it?
Justin Grimm is on the list. Yes. Jason Hamill as well. Yeah.
See, those guys, of course, are coming. The real thing, Matt, will be, and so I feel like a 10-year anniversary is almost, I don't say it's too soon because it's not too soon for anybody, but it does feel more premature than a lot of the celebration. Like you're looking now, for example, the Bulls are now going through this phase where they're doing 25-year anniversary or whatever it is of their championships or 30-year anniversaries. That has a little more distance. Like the 85 Bears now are 40 years out. So, whatever grievances you might have had with somebody when you were 23 years old, hopefully by the time you're 63 and your 40-year reunion, you kind of just say, hey, you're just somebody I knew and we played together and we won and that's great. And let's just, let's water under the bridge at that point. We would hope, if you can even remember why you don't like him in the first place. Right. But the 10-year, does seem a little more fresh in people's minds. So perhaps maybe at the 20-year, it'll feel a little bit different, like in 2035, when everybody's retired, when sadly, and this will be true, sadly, some people probably won't even be with us, for a variety of reasons, right? Have passed away. I think maybe you reminisce a little bit more, and you have a little bit more. I think you just look back at things more fondly the farther removed you are. It's more sentimental at that point as you're older and as you realize
That's
that
the thing. We're older, so 10 years feels fresh, as you mentioned. But like the 13-year-old who celebrated is now 23, and they're coming to Cubs convention, and they're gonna be having a beer at Lizzie McNeil's now and celebrating the thing when they were a teenager.
Meanwhile, I like hanging out with Lee Smith, right, and Bobby Grenier. Those are the guys who I want to hang out with and tell war stories too. The guys who I feel more kinship with than no offense to the 16 team who I love, but like they were kids. Yeah.
So this is as special of a team as it is to us, it is an entire generation of people who were 10 to 20 are now, this is it will feel further away from them than it does to us at this point.
I have the Super Bowl shuffle on record on 45 still from when I was a very young kid when they came out with it. And so, there are different teams hit you at different ages and in different places, right? And to watch a team do what the 2016 Cubs did while you were also an adult is just different than when you're a kid.
Correct. And I just listed everything they've advertised. Craig Council panel, Compound Live, the 2016 reunion, and the Cubs press conference. That's all they've announced. The 2016 and just Cubs convention draw alone has all the weekend passes are sold out, and the hotels are sold out. So it'll be again another huge success for the Cubs that weekend as well. So
and Bregman has to go as part of his contract probably, and Cabrera
100%.
in order to sign off on that to prevent arbitration, he'd agree. So they'll be there too, I'm sure.
I look forward to hearing if they're going to be streaming or showing any of this on Marquee. We'll see as we get. I think we're 1 week out, so we'll see if they announce anything here after we wrap up this podcast. But as of the time of this recording, hopefully, if you are coming out, hopefully we'll be able to meet up with some of you on the Friday night. So with that, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Time flies when we're talking Cubs. We have things to talk about, news and happenings. So much fun. Matt, thank you as always for coming on to talk with us. Please remind all of our listeners how they can find your work on the internet.
NorthsideBaseball.com, man. Obviously, I'm always doing more things than I can actually manage or keep track of myself. But NorthsideBaseball.com, that's where we're trying to build a community that's a little bit social media diaspora proof, that's a little bit, get in the habit of stopping by. We've got great forums, comment sections. We're publishing multiple pieces daily, got different layers of analysis, people working on prospect stuff specifically. Check in there often. Say hi, create an account. It's free, and sign up and join the conversation. That's where I'm going to be a lot. Otherwise, I'm on Blue Sky at matrueblood.bsky.social.
And make sure you're staying subscribed to this podcast, as we will be a little inconsistent here. I think the next time we come back will be post Cubs convention, and Zip's prediction show will probably be our next one. And we'll be rolling into spring training previews, and then we'll be back as spring training is right around the corner as well. So make sure you stay subscribed to this podcast. If you want to consume the video version of the podcast, that, of course, is available up on our YouTube channel. And even if you don't, going over there and throwing a subscribe helps us work the algorithm so other Cub fans can find the show. And make sure that you tell your Cub fan friends about the show. Cub fans know other Cub fans. So make sure you're telling them that you subscribe and listen to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Continue to spread the word. We rely on that, as well as our patrons over at patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. That's how we stay ad-free for another season as we go in to the upcoming season. Looking forward to not reading ads and staying ad-free because of our patrons. We're able to get Mike Cable replacements. Every single penny goes right back into the show. We appreciate every one of those folks that keep this show free and ad-free for everyone. And you can follow us on all the social media platforms at Wrigleyville Nat. That's the best way to interact with the show. And with that, we are going to wrap it up and call it a podcast. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Jeremy, real quick before we go, my daughter asked that I show you the Bears souvenir cup that she bedazzled for me today.
Very nice.
She was 3 months old when they last won a playoff game, and now they've won another one. So she's very excited, and she's all into Chicago sports now, which helps with her Cubs fandom as well. So hopefully some of you will have children who will use one of these teams to parlay into interest in the other team as well. So have a good day. I can't wait to go over Zips with you and Dan and the machine.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.